good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. You're very welcome to our Startup Women's Industry Roundtable for Women in Science and Technology. I'm Isabel Nolan, I'm the Director of Programs at Startup Canada. To begin, I would like to acknowledge the land on which I'm on today. It's located on the unceded and traditional territories of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations, also known as Vancouver. And as we are a national organisation, I'd also like to acknowledge with respect the diverse histories and cultures of all Indigenous peoples. And I encourage you to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional territories that you're residing on today. Startup Canada is a national nonprofit, and we position ourselves as a gateway to Canada's entrepreneurial ecosystem. We're here to connect entrepreneurs with the support, community, and tools that they need to build a successful business in Canada. And Startup Women is one of our annual programs that offers support to early stage women identifying entrepreneurs across Canada through topic-focused webinars, industry roundtables like today's, and meetings with startup women leaders. These monthly industry roundtables will provide you, the attendees, a deeper understanding of trends and best practices in your sector, and hopefully you'll leave with some actionable takeaways and resources you can implement into your business. We have a short message from our co-presenting partner, the Scotiabank Women's Initiative, and we'll go ahead and play that now.
The Scotiabank Women Initiative is dedicated to your success on your terms.
I'm shaping our industry's vision for the future.
I can expand my business without borrowing from my family.
I know I can face anything, thanks to my network.
I'm ready for my next chapter.
I'm inspiring future leaders.
I'm making sure my family's future is secure.
Define your success, and we'll help you achieve it. With unbiased access to capital and tailored solutions, bespoke specialized education, and holistic advisory services and mentorship. Join our community of women today, the Scotiabank Women Initiative.
And another thank you to our other co-presenting partner, UPS, and our program partner, Mastercard, ecosystem partners, WEOC, and Constant Contact.
The Scotiabank Women Initiative is dedicated
and our community of community partners, and we'll add a full list of those into the Zoom chat. So today's session is for women in science and technology. So I wanted to take you through what the schedule for today's section or today's session will be. So we will start off with some speed introductions of all of our attendees. So you can either do this by being on camera or in the chat. Next, we'll hear from two of the entrepreneurs that we have speaking today, and then followed by a 15-minute or so panel and Q&A, and bringing in our third speaker to that discussion as well. And then the last part of today's session, we'll be doing some networking breakout rooms where you'll get the chance to connect with about 2 to 3 attendees per breakout room. And we'll do 3 rounds of these for about 10 minutes each. So without further ado, I will go ahead and start the attendee introductions. If you have your camera on, I will assume that you're comfortable introducing yourself. So Jess, you are the first person up on my screen.
All right. Hey guys, I'm Jess. What can I tell you? I've been in the tech industry for 27 years. Mostly worked at big startup or big corporations, Lululemon. I left Reddit about a year ago, and I'm starting to build a Canadian social media company. So
very exciting. Thank you so much, Jess. Justine, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Justine Blick. I'm in BC. I am a former musician, and I am a music teacher. And I am developing a platform for schools that do not have music specialists so that homeroom teachers aren't left to their own knowledge to provide a music education, which is really important to children's growth.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Justine. Anne.
Hello. It's a nice segue to children's growth because that's all I do. So my name is Anne. I'm based in Southern New Brunswick, and I am the president and co-founder of Tricoast Education. So I have an language assessment that could identify language disorders in children, and it's on an online platform. So I'm in ed tech. And a little side thing, I just published my first children's book today. So we're kind of launching our social. So I've been very busy with that, and it's about developmental language disorder. And anyway, we're very, very excited. So it's a good day. Thank you.
Congratulations. That's so exciting, Anne.
Thank you.
Lauren.
Hi. Yeah, I'm the co-founder and managing partner of GrowWise. So we help innovative businesses in STEM and across other sectors access SHRED funding from the government, specifically tax credits. So yeah, looking to network and meet other folks in the space and see if I can maybe help anyone. Yeah, nice to meet you all.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lauren. Elena.
Hi, my name is Elena. I'm a founder of Go to Sky, and I'm currently developing a habit-based solution that will help workplaces to reduce burnout and improve productivity.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And to those who are just joining, we're doing some roundtable introductions of our attendees. So you're welcome to come on camera and introduce yourselves like we had a few folks doing there. Or if you're more comfortable, you can also introduce yourself in the chat. I'll give people a few more minutes if they want to come on screen and introduce themselves before we get into our entrepreneur expert talks. If there's anyone else that wants to pop their screen on and introduce themselves, now would be your time. Wonderful. Autumn.
Hi, I'm Autumn. I'm in Calgary. Was in the construction industry for over 15 years and saw a need for a new way of doing temp labor. And so me and my partner, co-founder, are creating an online marketplace to connect temporary labor people with companies.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Autumn. Lisa.
Hi, my name's Lisa. I'm the founder of Oceanic Impact. We are a marine conservation social enterprise that targets conservation issues through education and technology development. So I'm just here to learn and connect with everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And the person on the iPhone, it's the name is just iPhone. So I don't know.
Maybe it's me, is it?
Yes.
I am on my iPhone. My name's Vimy Henderson. I started P-Tech Engineering, and so we provide engineering consulting across Canada and internationally, all related to pavements, so related to roads and runways, and we also do research and so on.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining. Fatima, yeah.
Yeah, nice to meet you today. My name is Fatima Zara. I am the founder of Kensa AI. We're doing AI advisory, consulting and training on Gen AI for all global companies, Canadian, US market and Europe market too. I am perfectly bilingual, French and English. I'm based in Toronto, Ontario. And I'm dealing with many software companies using AI to build digital transformation for all SMB businesses here in Canada. Nice to meet you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining. Is there anyone else that wants to come on camera to introduce themselves before we move on to our entrepreneur talks? I see some people are introducing themselves in the chat, so thank you so much for doing that. Please feel free to add your LinkedIn, websites, any way that you want to everyone today to connect with you. Please feel free to add all those in. Alrighty, so I think we will get started with our entrepreneur expert talks. Before that, I'll just very quickly introduce who our speakers are, and speakers maybe can give away so everyone knows who you are. So we have Mallory Flynn, who is the co-founder of Insporos, Connie Stacey, the CEO and founder of Grengine, and Dr. Adrienne Crampton, who is the director of NeuroSphere. So I'll go ahead and invite Mallory first to kick things off and tell us your story.
Okay. I've got a couple of slides here just because I find it's always nice to look at something. I'm a visual person, so there's not too much to them. I just wanted this to kind of help you understand what we do at Insporos, because it also segues into why we started this company and who I am and my co-founder, and why this is important to us. So our company is Insporos. We're in the ag tech space, and in a nutshell, we analyze seeds. So what really kind of got us interested in this space, having not had a background in agriculture, is that we found out that up to 50% of the seeds that we plant in our greenhouses, our commercial greenhouses, actually will never reach maturity. So they germinate, but for some reason, something goes wrong. And often this is due to some sort of seed defect. So this could just be that a plant has poor vigor, which is, it's a term used in the industry. Essentially, that a plant is growing fast and strong, or that it's not uniform, which is a bigger problem in these commercial greenhouses. There's a lot of robotics relying on computer vision. And the other potential option is that the seed actually is infected with seed-borne disease. So seeds get diseases just like we do. They're alive. And so these are three of the main reasons why seeds can be, or I should say plants, can just never reach that maturity and never be producing fruits and vegetables for us. And at the moment in our commercial greenhouses, growers don't have a way to identify which seeds are going to be good or not before they plant them. And so the current solution is simply to overplant. So they figure out what this failure rate is, acknowledge that failure rate, and simply overplant. However, what that means is that from the time they plant these seeds to the time they actually discard that plant, they spend a lot of money and resources, such as water, fertilizer, the labor, the energy to heat the space, and the space itself, in trying to grow these plants that are just going to be discarded anyways. So at Insporos, what we're doing, there's no good picture here except this AI generated one, but what we're doing is we're using a proprietary hardware technology that we developed, paired with some AI algorithms to essentially find and remove these defective seeds from whatever seed batch was going to be planted before it's planted, so that we're saving growers this time and these resources. And this is really enabling this predictability and stability for growers that hasn't been there in the industry yet today. There is other uses for this technology. So what we've also found is that we're able to predict a lot of the traits of the future plant as well. And so we also see this technology moving into the breeding space as time goes on as well, the plant breeding space. And Insporos was founded by myself. I'm CEO of the company now as well, and my co-founder, Amanda. And Amanda's a brilliant chemist. I met her while being a PhD student at UBC. We've since moved on from that. But essentially, both of us kind of came together, worked on this technology outside of Insporos to begin with, worked on this technology that was unrelated to our grad studies, and then found that it has this sort of amazing application with seeds, which is how we ended up in the agriculture space. And both of us are really driven by that, the desire to make a difference in some sort of way, and in particular with the climate. That is something that we're both interested in, and food security. So that's really what brought us together. In the first place, my background is my PhD background. I was a researcher in math and statistics, and that has really that is really where I come from, and how I apply those skills in the company on a daily basis is a big thing on the AI algorithm side of things. And then Amanda, of course, is with she's a materials chemist, so with that hardware that we developed. Was extremely instrumental in that, and us being able to gather this kind of unique data in the first place. I think that's all I have as far as slides go. But yeah, so we have been at it for since 2022, when we met and started working on the tech, we actually we joined a course at UBC where scientists and MBA students are brought together to have sort of a mock startup for a term. We ended up bringing this idea to the course so that we could learn the ropes of that side of things, the MBA side of things, let's say, and do some customer discovery, learn how to do our financials and all those types of things, and ended up incorporating the company in 2023. We now have about 10 employees working for us, if you count our timers as their FTE. And yeah, we're based in Vancouver. And I think that's all I wanted to say for my intro. But thank you. I'm really excited to be here. I love being in a space where there's women in tech and women innovators brought together.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mallory, for taking us through your journey and who Insporos is. Connie, I'm now going to pass it over to you to share us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thank you. And Mallory, super cool. Totally love what you're doing. That's amazing. My name's Connie Stacey. I'm the founder and CEO of Grengine. And in terms of story, I think back to kind of how I got here. It really came as an intersection between a love of technology and a love of, or a passion for trying to create better equality in our society. And it came kind of to a head when I had a walk one day where I was walking my twin boys who were asleep in a stroller, and I passed by a house being built and they were running a diesel generator. And I thought, if you wake these babies, I'm going postal. And luckily they didn't wake up that day and I kept walking, but it really got me thinking, well, why do we use diesel generators? They're horrid on the environment. They're super expensive. They're loud. They smell like nobody enjoys it. But when I looked into the problem, what it really came down to was renewables aren't easily plug and play. Now, some parts of it are, like you can get some basics around solar panels that you can plug into some basic devices and have power. But batteries weren't. Batteries, because of the safety reasons, actually require an enormous amount of engineering because that's what we have to do to keep it safe. And a little bit of context, in batteries, the media always talks about chemistry, which is incredibly important, but it's only half of the equation. The other half is physics, or more specifically, electronics and flow of the electrical energy. And that's where we live. So what we really do is we build a brain. We build the brains that allow you to access the energy in a single cell. So that's kind of more similar to building computers, manufacturing computers, than it would be to chemistry in the typical sense. So what we did is we set out to create a technology where all of that engineering could be in the brain of the battery itself, so that you could create these modules, think like Lego bricks, that you could just stack. So if you need a small amount, you have less bricks. If you need bigger energy, you have more bricks. And that became very successful. We've had some really big pilots over the last few years. The original concept was back in 2013. I officially opened the doors and had my first employee in 2016, so I've been around a while. Over that time, we've had a few different successful pilots. Predominantly, we've worked with the Canadian Department of Defense, but also some other groups, so getting them off of diesel generators. Recently, we just finished a big pilot up in the Arctic Circle. So if you thought batteries can't work in the cold, think again. I've got pictures to prove it. And now we've just actually recently finished the latest component of our technology, which has to do with cybersecurity. So we're actually the only battery company in the world that has integrated cybersecurity right at the PCB level, which if you followed any of it in the news, like when in 2015, the Russians took down the Ukraine grid, 230,000 people lost power. You couldn't do that with our technology. Same like there were fires in Australia with Tesla battery packs that were hacked back in 2021. Again, that can't happen with our technology. So very, very advanced tech in terms of the security in particular, but also in terms of that accessibility to the technology. And really it comes down to this idea of, to create a better, more equal society, people have to have access to energy. So if you're not familiar, access to energy and economic growth are perfectly correlated. So you literally cannot end poverty unless you end energy poverty. So that really was the passion for me to get started in all of this. It was a long and arduous process to get to this point where we're now fully commercializing and really kind of launching out the door. And manufacturing a hardware tech is it's a challenge. It's lots of challenges, but lots of like exciting opportunities too. So hopefully I can share a bit of that knowledge and hopefully it's useful for you. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Connie. And hopefully attendees hearing from Mallory and Connie on their journey, it's maybe sparking some questions that you might want to ask them, or anything that you're looking for guidance on that maybe they've gone through already. So we will go into our sort of panel discussion section. We have organized quite a lot of questions for our speakers, just so we can ensure we've got a great flow to our conversation. But we always want to be putting your questions at the forefront. So if you do have a question for our our speakers, you can use the raise hand function and ask on camera, or if you're more comfortable, you can ask in the Q&A box, which is in the bottom menu bar on your screen. So we've heard from our two entrepreneurs, and I'd love to pass it on to Adrienne from NeuroSphere to tell us a little bit about her and how she's fitting into this realm.
Yeah, for sure. No, always got to start with the entrepreneurs. Really interesting work, Connie, Mallory. Glad to be hearing more about what you've built. It's really impressive. So I'm Adrienne. Going to take the flip side to more the support of innovation and entrepreneurship. So I'm the director of NeuroSphere, and NeuroSphere is positioned as McGill's Neuroscience Innovation Accelerator. So what we're really trying to do is to support innovation and entrepreneurship across, the neuroscience community here at the university, and also beyond the university. As we've grown over the years, we're really trying to spread our wings, and we started here at McGill, and now we're trying to open our doors and bring value where we can across the neuroscience ecosystem, in Canada and beyond. So I'll take a step back first, and just like Connie and Mallory, just introduce a little bit my journey and how I landed here. I originally was just, completely passionate about human movement. I'm an athlete. Always grew up in athletics, and I loved kinesiology. So I always thought, okay, I'm going to do something, clinical practice or be a doctor or something like that. And then as I did my kin, I realized I really have an interest for the business side of things as well. So decided, okay, maybe I'll go and do a master's in business. But right as I was doing that, I also had a really complicated injury that took years to recover from. And that actually made me do a 180 back into academia. And I came back to do a PhD in that field, which was complicated concussions, mild traumatic brain injuries. And very quickly, I realized that the world of academia is incredible, and there's tons of answers to questions that exist in the labs. But one of the issues is that, those answers stay in the labs, and not enough is done to pull them out of the labs. But you do also need somebody who can speak both languages, right? Because it's a very different environment. Industry is one language, and academia is another language, and kind of wanting to work at the intersection of both is not necessarily common across academics, and individuals who are already in industry sometimes find it frustrating trying to pull those innovations out, because there's different hurdles, there's different barriers when you're speaking with the tech transfer offices and stuff like that. So I really realized, wow, I really like that intersection. I like working to pull those innovations from the lab to the market or to the world in whatever capacity that might look like. And so I decided, well, finish my PhD so that I understand how knowledge is created, and how the whole world of academia works and the machine works in institutional settings, but really then evolving into a role where I could kind of bridge the two worlds. And, it was a bit serendipitous. There was an opportunity that came up at a larger initiative called Healthy Brain, Healthy Lives. And Healthy Brain, Healthy Lives is the initiative that actually created NeuroSphere. And at the time, NeuroSphere was a bit of a shell. It was created back in 2019 for the purpose of growing into an innovation accelerator. So I'll pull up a couple of slides real quickly to situate our group. Of course, we're cycling slides. Let's see here. I'll just view a slideshow, I think. Or there we go. So I'll give you a look. So basically, the way that we're positioned at McGill is we work really closely with the tech transfer office, but we're external. So we were born from that larger initiative that gave us a lot of funding. So we were really lucky. We did have some funding for our operations, and we had some funding that we could put into different projects. And our team works with the other teams here at the university in different ways to basically optimize the use of resources that are here in the ecosystem that can drive forward the commercialization of either technologies or the creation of young startup companies born from McGill. And over the years, we've grown from 1.5 individuals to a team of 5 full-time employees, and then various different consultants that we kind of bring in on a need basis. And I like this slide because I think it really summarizes what we try to put an emphasis on, but also how we've iterated over the years. You know, there's lots of different ways to support innovation and entrepreneurship born from an academic setting, but one of the things that we really noticed was that personalized support and bringing every group a different type of support at the time they need it in the way that they need it was really important. And we decided not to take a cohort approach, but really to put an emphasis on finding the projects, not letting the projects come to us, but going out there in the labs and finding the projects, pulling them out, and then basically saying, what do you need? How can we help you? And in what capacity can we leverage the skills and the resources that we have on our team to help you drive towards your objective, be it just, licensing the tech and maturing it to a point where it can be licensed, or building a shell and then starting to fill the shell that will eventually become the startup company. And over the years, we've really kind of come to quite a few interesting outputs, and we've accomplished a lot. And we couldn't do that without the community. So we've really built a community and put an active focus on building the community, because as a lot of people on this call know, most people are actually entrepreneurs on this call. It takes a village, right? There's different resources at each stage. There's different people that can bring, funding. There's different people that can bring in-kind support. And so without using all of those different pods, we can't really get rolling, right? And get to that inflection point. So we're just trying to fill basically a gap that's at the earliest stages of innovation. And then we pass it off to other actors. So I'll leave it there for now, but happy to answer questions and just bring complementary value to the insights that Connie and Mallory will bring more on the startup side.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for bringing that through. And yeah, the slides are a great help as well to kind of visually see where you're positioned and what you're doing. So, I'll open it up first. Are there any questions that are coming to mind for our attendees, or I can kick us off to warm everyone up? Elisa, yeah.
Hi. So I'm located in Ottawa, and I'm the founder of MindSherpa.health. It's an AI companionship to employees in the workplace. We have various, solutions in AI and assessment tools to provide to employers for a roadmap for a more holistic, less stressful environment to work with. And I wanted to ask Adrienne. I'm located in Ontario. I just checked, there is like 4 programs that are open. Do you have anything with the digital mental health?
Yeah, so mental health is definitely a focus, and happy to chat more offline about the specifics of the programs, but anything that touches on neuroscience is definitely of interest to our group, and seeing how we can support it is definitely within our wheelhouse. So that's a big focus. Yeah.
Amazing. So how to reach you, like via email?
Yeah, I think that my contact information is probably on the emails, or Sultana can maybe share that. Yeah. Okay, perfect.
Okay. Thank you very much.
No worries.
I'd love to talk to you. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Let's catch up.
Yeah, thanks. I won't talk about the challenges, but a lot of like early pre-seed, pre-revenue, the struggle is funding, of course. Like I have a team of 5 people that I'm losing the funding, like I may lose them because of lack of funding. So I'm very much curious to see if there is like some way to support like at our stage. I don't know. A lot of the programs are like commercialization. I don't want to take over all the conversation, but I haven't seen any pre-revenue assistance. I don't know if it's in your objectives of the programs you have, so I'd love to explore that.
Yeah, so a lot of the funding programs that we have are actually for pre-revenue, right? It's really to work on the R&D components, and I think that that's a gap that exists at large. Is that, you know, there's a lot of programs that are there for companies that have already kind of kicked off and are at a stage where they're, you know, maybe they have one full-time employee, or have at least gotten past that first valley of death. I kind of see it as there's 2 valleys of death. But ours are very much to work on the R&D to get the technology or the solution to a point where it can attract the next round of funding. So none of the companies that we support have actually generated revenue at the inception, you know, when they first came into the programs. Now some of them are, but we're there to get them to that stage.
Thank you.
Adrienne, and I don't know, Mallory, Connie, do either of you want to talk about how you navigated the early parts of funding, you know, the R&D phase, or bring team members on?
I'll jump in, sure. You know me, never shy. You know what, the early days were really hard. The challenges changed. I wouldn't say it's gotten easier. I would say that the challenges have changed. The early stage, we didn't really get a lot of funding, and I mean effectively almost zero, despite the fact that, you know, I came into this thinking, well, you know, this was 2016, batteries were just starting to be a big conversation. People were starting to whisper. I thought, oh, a diverse owned business in the right technology, but we didn't get funding, and there's a lot of reasons I think that play into it, and part of it comes to things like unconscious bias. You know, and let's face it, a lot of people I'm sure looked at me and went, sure, you're going to start a battery manufacturing company. Let me know how that works out. But there was also a lot of bias in there, and some of it was flat out sexism as well. You know, I had somebody stop by our offices at one point a few years ago and came in and said, I saw your website and I thought I'd just stop by and explain to you girls how electricity works. For real story. But more, it was less the, pardon me, overt things. It was more the unconscious things. I think that played a bigger role. It was interesting. Earlier this year, I was meeting with someone who was a president of a bank, and he was saying the bank he was with previously had a fund. They actually had 2 matching funds. They were 50 million each, and one was a regular, like it went to the standard innovations that they had targeted, and the other was specific for women. Now, the standard one, the return averaged about 11%, which is pretty good. And the one with the women averaged 72%. Like, the women absolutely knocked it out of the park. So the stats are there that show that women do better. But the reality is the funding doesn't always support it. I ended up getting through it predominantly, when you say dodge and weave, you know, it was very creative in terms of how we came up with funding. One of the things I did that I'm not sure I've met anybody else who did this, but we couldn't get bank financing because we had no credit, and we didn't have investors because nobody actually thought I would pull it off, whether from bias or not. So when we got to our first, we did a small solar generator first, and it was actually the first lithium one on the market. So the only thing out there at the time was a 120-pound lead acid unit from Goal Zero, and we came out with this slick little 13-pound unit. I didn't have money to build them. So I found a pair of angels that were willing to do debt financing and take a commission on the sales. So I said, okay, if you advance it, I'll sell it and I'll give you part of the profit from the sales, and then we can refinance another round of production. And that worked out. It ended up being a little more complicated of a deal, so we ended up kind of restructuring it after a while. But that was one of the things that I did to be creative to get around it. Anywhere where I could get support for staff was one of the things that was actually a bit easier to get, like IRAP Youth Grant, or here in Alberta, it's Alberta Innovates has some staff grants that you can get as well for offsetting costs of staff, and then shred credits. So being able to kind of recover some of that cost through taxes, etc. So those were kind of some of the things we accessed early. I'm not sure what the equivalents are in Ontario, but I'm sure that they probably are out there. So things like micro vouchers and stuff, where you're looking at $5,000 and $10,000, little pieces that you can then use to kind of advance things. And it was piecemeal, but dodge and weave, we got through.
Brilliant. Thank you, Connie. And Matt, I don't know if you have anything to add in terms of how you navigated those early stage days, what kind of funding you were going after.
Yeah, I would say we're still in the early stage days because we are also still pre-revenue. And I would agree, like I would just echo a lot of what Connie said. Even going through this just the past couple of years, there's definitely challenges being women founders that we've noticed that are both over comments being made and certain ways that we're approached. But as far as the funding goes, I mean, my co-founder and I both definitely came from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. We didn't have our own money or family money to put into the business from the beginning. So we had to figure out how to get around that. And for us, as we basically, what we wanted to do was we set up some milestones. We came up with a plan to essentially use the most shoestring budget we could possibly come up with in order to meet some milestones that we thought would be really show the potential of this technology. And so how we got there was, I mean, for us, creating a technology, a hard technology that's expensive, it takes time, and the equipment is expensive. So we did what we could in terms of borrowing equipment. We looked into a whole bunch of leasing options for various components just while we proved the technology and got to that stage. And essentially we worked for nothing for a long time, still now. And so I think that like the beginning was very, very difficult. And I don't really have a whole lot to offer in terms of like it not being difficult, but since we were able to meet some of these milestones, then the ball kind of feels like it gets rolling. IRAP support has been really good in actually bringing people on board, which Connie also mentioned. We also funded through like a variety of pitch competitions, and we pretty much like in the very early days, like joined any kind of competition we possibly could, for one, to get that exposure, and also to get some practice pitching, because there was, I mean, which I know is in the questions that are coming, but there's some difficulties as a scientist in the kind of like relearning how to talk about your business and present it to different audiences. And so that was great for that, but it also brought in some cash in the early days. We leveraged that cash through grants like the student work placement program. We've used a lot of students through the Ripen projects. So there is some ways to kind of fund those early stages through that type of funding before you actually get to an investment round.
Yeah, Mallory, I'll just add on one thing, a practical one. If people haven't heard of it, the forum used to be called the Forum for Women Entrepreneurs, but it's on a great pitch competition. We ended up winning that during COVID. It was a particularly big prize that year. It was $50,000. I think the regular one is 25 plus 25 in supports. Really worthwhile to apply to, and you get great mentorship in it.
And I was just gonna echo the importance of focusing on trying to find ways to get even small amounts of dollars into that company bank account, because as Mallory said, then you can leverage it, right? So if at the earliest stages, you can start pitching and finding those opportunities that would get some small amounts in your bank account, that'll help you then leverage. And even if it's a small amount, well, you can leverage it. And most of the times it's okay, company puts in 10 to 20% and you're unlocking the other 80%. And then that'll kind of get your R&D to a point where, okay, now we can win a bit of a bigger competition and so on. So it's very complicated. It's a game of Tetris, but it's just something that often isn't told, especially for scientific startups, and people start doing it a little bit further down the line, and then it's a bit of a plateau for a while until a few competitions are won and there's enough money in the bank account, company bank account.
It's a great point with pitch competitions, and Mallory, that's actually how we came to know Mallory. She pitched at our startup global pitch competition last year, and won a few $1,000s for her business. So and placed at our grand finale as well, I believe, Mallory, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So it's yeah, it's a great way, and also it's a great way to get your company out there as well, and to network, and the other benefits that you get from that, not just the monetary side, but of course the monetary side of things is always wonderful to get. I don't know if we still have our attendee in the room from GrowWise. I know they talked about they want to talk a little bit about Tread, but I think they might have left. But I just want to double check if they are here.
Can I raise another question, or is
Perfect. Elisa, if you want to take a note of it, I'm just going to make sure if there's another attendee with a question.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely, back to you. So if there's any questions from our attendees, please use the raise hand function, and we can ask it to our speakers. All right, Elisa, you can ask your follow-up question if you'd like.
Okay, so I just want to say that I did receive funding through programs, through the youth program. My challenge is that, what do you do when you run out of funding? Those programs are only 12 weeks. Ripen is like good. It's only like short. What do you do? Like, you cannot retain those talents. Like, either you pay from your bootstrapping. I was just like, I see that you struggle too. So it's not like just, when you're developing an MVP, like it's our second version. So I don't know if you can speak about that. And the other thing is that if someone knows more about IRAP, I reach to the technical advisor, and I'm just not moving forward to offer that as a project. So I can do Shred, and I'm going to do Shred, but if you have an input on that, I'd love to hear about that. And I'll use whomever writes in the what competitions are open. I got rejected as well. So I think it's because they're saying we want to see more traction. So that's like been my biggest challenge. So and I see you guys struggling with the same thing. So I know I'm not alone.
Yeah, for sure. So I definitely can relate. And I think that one of the things that's been really important for us is, as we get these small bits of funding, just to make sure we know where that's going to and how we're going to, like, what's the plan at the end of that. So yes, like we also got IRAP youth employment funding, but we have also leveraged co-ops quite a lot. So I mean, we have an advantage in coming from the university system already, that we know sort of like which degree track is going to produce some students and at what year like we can actually hire from. So we've been able to hire third and fourth year engineering physics co-ops that have been absolutely incredible in getting the first stages of our prototypes finished and in helping us in proving the technology at that first level. And it's as for the company that is very well supported, labor costs as well. So through the student work placement program, there's a bunch of providers of that money throughout Canada. So I mean, here we've used ICTC, we've used an ag-specific provider of the student work placement program money, and you know, that's up to $7,000 for a co-op term. And so it ends up that co-op term actually doesn't cost the company very much money, but the value that these students have brought to us is like difficult to overstate. Like they've really been amazing. And we have one of our first co-ops is now coming back now that he's graduated, and would like to work for us. So I think it just, I think there is other programs like that out there. And we also, you know, we keep our eye on the dates that grants open. There's a bunch of very specific, it's hard to say exactly as far as competitions and grants both go. I think that there's some very general ones, but there's often some that are very specific to your actual area. So, you know, like for us, we won a few ag pitch competitions, so that would work for us, but you know, not every company here, of course. But I think that we spent a lot of time actually looking for these kinds of pitch competitions, writing a whole list of what they were. Also looking at conferences, because conferences were a great place to actually meet other people. We're being two co-founders from technology and academia and not business. There was a lot of things that we just didn't know about just the business landscape and how running a company actually works. And how to get funding for a company. And so that was also really instrumental in the early days, is talking to other people in that space. And that's not only through our own university, which had a bunch of kind of networking events for a very small, though, entrepreneur community at UBC. There was also Simon Fraser University in town. We would go to those events. We would go to all sorts of different events just to talk to people. And I think what we found is that the community is really small, at least within Vancouver, and you quickly get to know people, and people tend to share. You meet other companies like yours, and they tend to share their resources as well. So you can get much more specific resources. We found by talking to other founders.
I would echo what Mallory said and add, go and be as connected as possible to your local ecosystems. I mean, there's usually something at the municipal, something at the provincial, and then again at the federal levels. Leverage it as much as you can, because it's not just money, it's being smart with the money. And, you know, Mallory brought up a really good point. Like, you start out and you come from a tech background, who the heck knows how to do payroll? That was a learning curve, let me tell you. And a lot of these folks will help you access those resources. Some of them will even have a certain amount of free resource, and then you're not spending money on it, right? Instead of having to spend extra money on an accountant, maybe they're able to help you with some really basic bookkeeping and some introduction courses, things like that. So yes, look for money, but look also for some of the services. That goes a long way. I also popped into the chat My Tax, which is another program where you can get students working with you. And I found it to be a great program when we used it. And I recruited, like I went looking for people, and frankly, I made deals. You know, I can't offer you the best in the world, but I can offer you exciting. I can offer you world-leading technology. And, you know, it was hard to get people to some degree, but not impossible. And the cash is always going to be hard. I mean, the reality is even now, I'd say for every 20 things we apply to, we might get one. And we're quite established, right? I mean, we're 9 years in, and we've passed that million in revenue mark, and pre-commercial revenue even. So like we've come a long way, and we're well recognized. We've had lots of awards. It's still not easy. I honestly, it's funny, I'm giving a keynote for the University of Alberta event on Saturday, and I was going through some of my notes this morning, and one of the things that, you know, I was planning to talk about is the fact that I think ultimately your biggest resource is determination, because you will get no 1,000 times before you get yes. So you have to really dig in and be determined to get across the line, because, you know, if it's going to take 5 and then you're out, you won't get there, because it's going to take a lot more than 5 attempts to get a yes. It's going to take maybe 500. But you got to keep going. And each time you do it, you get better. Like Mallory said, it's practice, it's exposure. Each one of these is networking. You know, we applied, it was actually quite quite serendipitous, I guess, in some regards. But somebody had sent me a link for a U.S. Department of Defense innovation competition they put on. And interestingly, anybody in the world could apply. They didn't ask about the founders. They just asked about the technology. So unconscious bias couldn't play a part because they didn't even ask who owned it. And lo and behold, we won. And even though there was no money associated to it, people looked at our stuff and went, whoa, the US Department of Defense said this is world-leading technology. Maybe I should take a second look. And those kind of things, sometimes it's not money that's immediately apparent. It's the reputation, pardon me, as well as the connections, and then that leads you to the money.
I think the one source, if I'll jump in just with one more recommendation, and it's only been starting lately, but in addition to MyTax and a lot of the co-ops, which are absolutely amazing, for those of you who might be looking for that. Sorry, did you hear an echo? Sorry. For those of you who might be looking for that business side, if you have a very scientific background, I know at McGill and probably some other schools, there's an Office of Experiential Learning, and they've actually built it into the curriculum that, students can get course credits working for a company. So there, it's, very little financial requirements from the company. Sometimes there's requirement that, there's a formal structure, there's at least a minimum of a couple of employees in the company, but then you can get that complementary support. If you have a very scientific team, you can get a really excited young student joining. And a lot of the times, as Mallory said, those turn into future hires and the onboarding's very easy. But yeah, so take a look at the MBA programs or the Faculty of Management or business schools in certain universities that might be in your vertical or in your field.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for all those resources and advice to our speakers. And yeah, there's some really great options that have been linked in the chat, and a few other organizations that have been mentioned as well. So do encourage everyone to check those out and see if there's any fit for your business. Is it Vinny that's on the iPhone? I see you have your hand up.
It is. I know this is a technology chat. I appear very unable to use technology today. But and I was just going to comment that we got funding in the beginning. It is a loan, but from Community Futures. And so our situation is a little different, right? As a consulting firm, rather than necessarily inventors and whatnot. But the bank said, yes, we're happy to fund you, but not until, you've been successful for a few years. And so it was a chicken and egg situation. But Community Futures was able to give us quite a significant loan, and we were able to get up and running. So anyways, a big credit to them.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. We can add some Community Futures. They've got posts all across Canada, and they are a fantastic resource. All right. Oh, put myself on mute by accident. Are there any other questions from our attendees? I honestly love when we barely touch the questions that we have prepared with our speakers, because it really just shows that we're able to support who's in the room and help you on any challenges or roadblocks that you currently have.
Yeah, I have one question, if you allow me, Isabel. As we are in early stage, like we are before the stage of our MVP, because we have many prospects that love our products, but as we are in AI space, we need a lot of research and development for make it, more up to date using the latest agentic AI and Gen AI. So we have already tried MyTax. It's very good, but all of them depends on, when we get funds, because everything you have to pay, you have to cooperate with them. You have to pay some 40 or 50K before to do cooperation, or to build the application. We need many AI and data scientists too. They are very costly. So my question is, for Community Futures, already been there, some of you today. If you know, if doesn't work after, so how many, so for example, you take a business there and you take the loan and you manage and do everything. If doesn't work, you take the money and give it back to community features. So how it works? Can someone explain to me?
Great question, Fatima. I personally can't answer the question, but I don't know, Vinny, if you want to come back on to talk about
Yeah.
how.
I mean, from what I know and understand, it's a loan. So I mean, you're responsible for paying it off, right? So that's the risk
That's the
piece.
risk. Mm-hmm.
It is a loan rather than a grant or free money.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, exactly. So if the enterprise go well, then you can pay your loan monthly or yearly. It depends how you are convinced with them. And then if doesn't work, and it's not up to you because there is no clients. There is the market is not stable. It's everything. So you come back the money to them, or you are responsible. Many responsibility. I want to just to understand if that helps to scale, if you're in trouble to not being successful to do the lead, or get customer, it's not your fault. So how would they react like in this situation?
I think I haven't used the Community Futures one. Thanks for that. I'm definitely going to check it out, whoever first brought that up. But loans, it's always dependent on the terms. So some of them will have securities. So like some things will ask you to put in personal guarantees. So like some of my first stuff, I was on the hook. My house was on the hook.
Okay.
So if we went under, they were coming after my house, right?
Okay.
Some of them, it's specific to the corporation, so it doesn't have a personal guarantee. Early stuff often requires a personal guarantee, which is tricky because you don't want to put yourself and your family in risk. And I did. And over the years, I mean, I've put in, and not including the salary I haven't been paid, I put in a lot of money. Somehow I'm still married. That makes my wife a saint, I'm pretty sure, but it does bring risk when you put that promissory note or some kind of a personal guarantee. The upside, though, is non-dilutive funding when you're early can be very powerful. The sooner you give up equity, the more expensive it is. So people always have this tendency in the ecosystem to talk as though equity is not a type of debt. In some ways, it's the worst type of debt because it's a debt you can't pay off. You will pay it forever. Now, that's not necessarily the worst thing if you have the right equity partners, but it can go very, very sideways very fast. I didn't realize in that early stage just how serious it was when people said it's like getting married. I'd say it's harder. It's easier to get a divorce than to separate from an equity shareholder in your company.
Yes.
So getting the right person is tough. There's a story I often think of. The pair of entrepreneurs in California, Mark and Martin, started a company, really great tech, hardware tech, super expensive to do hardware tech, right? So they were, I think, less than 2 years in, and they needed to bring in an investor. Someone brought them an investor that was he had money. He had never been a founder, but he had been involved in startups that have been successful. So they jumped right on it and they brought this guy in. Well, that guy ended up forcing them out of the company. And the company grew to be a great success. But when you think of Tesla, you don't think of Martin and Mark, right? Elon Musk was never a founder. He stole that company out from two people. And he was quite ruthless about it. So when you bring people on as an equity-based investor, you really, really want to do your diligence because they talk about due diligence on the company. You want to do due diligence on them as well, because who you get involved with can be completely drown you or can lift you up. I mean, the right equity investor can bring distribution, can bring network, can bring all sorts of amazing things, but you want to know. So debt is interesting because it's hard to come by, that non-dilutive funding, but when you can get it, you're still maintaining control. The sooner you give up equity, the greater the value that you're ultimately giving up, right? Because the company is worth less at the start. So it's a balance. We might have gone down the equity road sooner. We haven't yet. I still actually own 100% of the company. And a lot of it, I think, was just investors really looked at us and didn't think I was going to pull it off. Believe it or not, gay women who own battery companies as a global pool of one. So, you know, we're a bit unique in our space, so to speak. But, you know, with the debt financing, it now has come to a point, of course, the company is worth a lot more. So now going into a raise, I can actually be a lot more picky. So it's a mix. Definitely read the fine print. Read the fine print on any kind of loan, anything equity-based, anything. Read the fine print.
Yeah, except grants, because governments can support you in the early stage with the grants, and you have to hire.
Sort of. Yeah, so be careful of the fine print there as well, because sometimes grants have some fine print that isn't amazing. So like we had a youth grant not long ago where we hired someone and they really just weren't working out. But when we read the fine print, it said if we let them go during the 6 months of the funding, we had to repay all the funding. So we had to keep this person who was really not a great fit. So sometimes there's that kind of thing. Sometimes there can be IP things. So like with the testing stream program, we ended up, the fine print basically said after the tests were over, they could do whatever they wanted to our technology. And the last thing we wanted was our batteries being used in an unsafe environment. And then suddenly there's a fire and my reputation is ruined because somebody's doing something they shouldn't. So we actually ended up pushing back and saying, no, you can have it as a lease, but you're not buying it. So you can work with them on that, but some of those bigger programs, especially, you do want to read some of the fine print because again, there can be IP considerations. Like in this case, the government of Canada was allowed to build onto our technology, so use it as a leaping platform and stuff like that. We were pretty hesitant about that. So read the fine print.
Read the fine print. Okay, thank you for your advice. Thank you. We're learning every day. Thanks for sharing.
No problem.
Yeah, I would actually, I feel like I need to echo that just because we've also gone through a lot of this and I feel like it is so important. If you're not used to reading legal contracts, start now. Start getting used to legal language, start trying to understand what is in your contracts, not only contracts that you're being presented with from a bank or from other loan providers, but also your own company documents and how is your share, like what does all of this mean in your shareholders agreement? What all these things mean? How does your board structure? That's super important as well as a company. If you are going to accept equity investment, what does that look like? What are all the terms in those contracts actually mean? Though it's all so important. And I will say that even with grants, there are grants that are considered repayable that are offered by all levels of government. And what the terms of those repayments are, you also going to want to know, because they kind of throw around this term grant and you think it's just money that you're being given to support a project. And in some circumstances, you actually do have to pay it back. And in some circumstances, you have to pay it back with a certain multiple. So I know there's a grant in BC that we were just offered that this kind of came only when they delivered the contract, is that those were terms in the contract and that was never sort of talked about before that's what it would be like. And so now we're in this sort of negotiation phase of is this even something we want to go with? And it presents a whole new way that we actually have to look at this money and try to figure out if this makes sense for us. Does it impact any fundraising that we want to do later? Because now this is a loan essentially on our books and not a grant. And so I would definitely echo what Connie said and make sure you take that time to actually read through all of the contracts. If there's anything you don't understand, lawyers are expensive. So I totally understand and feel that we avoid going to the lawyer with as much as we possibly can. But that's also offset by the amount of effort that we've personally put in trying to understand these documents and try to make the most sense of it, to write really targeted questions and use that time with a lawyer very effectively. We've also leveraged resources like free resources where we could as much as possible. Get time with corporate lawyers and there generally is, if you look at some of your local law firms, some of the bigger firms actually put on events. And so, and this is their corporate division. So they'll put on, yesterday there was at Osler in Vancouver, where Osler's all over the place. And so at Osler in Vancouver, they put an event about exit readiness, so M&A, mergers and acquisitions. And in going to those events, not only do we, those actually tend to be really informative. What we've found is the ones that the law firms put on. So those tend to be informative, but then also there's a bunch of lawyers there. And so if you already have some questions in relation to that, you can kind of throw those out there. If it's a more general question that you're kind of wondering about, then I would recommend that too.
Could you share the link for that?
I don't have a link so that was yesterday, but the law firm is Osler, but like those big law firms, Osler, Fasken, there's firms that are all across the country and the world. So I would say that like the events that we've gone to at those bigger firms have been actually pretty quality.
Yeah, thank you.
One quick trick, Jess actually mentioned it in the chat. Something I do is I feed it through AI first. And I say, make sure, of course, it's not feeding back to the system, but I'll feed in the contract and then ask it questions and ask it to give me a summary and stuff. And it works well. And you can give it like a reference, like here's a link to, the Alberta bylaws that might apply or something like that. And it'll give me pretty good, kind of narrows down the number of questions you need to ask that expensive lawyer.
Yeah. Jen, AI saves lives.
Brilliant. Yeah, I've just added some links in there for you, Fatima, and our other attendees as well on Osler and Fasken. Gowling is another one that we've worked with in the past as well. I can put the link in there as well. But fantastic advice on going to those events, Mallory, and sort of tapping their shoulder while they're there. So any sort of resources like that. Connie, you brought up a good point on intellectual property, and I think especially within this field, protecting yourself and your innovations as much as possible is so important. Can you talk about like what the process was like for you and what you did to protect yourself in the early stages to protect your later stage, I guess?
Yes.
Yeah, you know what? We've had good stories and we've had bad stories in terms of the IP piece. I'll give you the bad story first, which was when we first started out, everybody told me you can't manufacture in Canada. Nobody manufactures in Canada. You need to contract the manufacturing. And I was really quite opposed to it. And it's one of the few things I regret is that I allowed somebody to convince me that my opinion was wrong. And we did our first product, we contracted manufacturing to a company in China. It was quite an established company, quite big. It took about 6 weeks before my solar generator was for sale on Alibaba with my logo on it. That was it. All the money we had spent into that was largely wasted. So then some companies who were really just marketing companies came in, bought it, and put, dropped 10 million in marketing dollars in it and sold my product very effectively. Not to my advantage. There was no way to protect that IP. On the flip side, we did get a utility patent on kind of the modular stacking component of our battery system, which if you're not familiar, a utility patent is kind of the gold standard. So a design patent, if they change kind of the configuration, they're by the patent. Utility patent says, I don't care how you do it, if you're solving the same problem in effectively the same way, then you're violating the patent. So we were able to secure a utility patent in both Canada and the US. So that was really good. It was a learning process. There's some good tools you can access. I didn't know that at the time, but there's like Elevate IP and some different ones in every level of government. Usually there's a little bit of something. So go and search them up. I feel like Elevate IP is actually federal, but I know some contacts that are provincial. I see Adrienne nodding in the background, so she can chime in, I'm sure, on this afterwards, because as a university connected group, she's probably quite familiar with this. But having the secured IP, the patent is quite good. We're actually looking right now at moving ahead, hopefully with some licensing, because there are some infringers now. So it's a challenge, right? Because now we have people infringing, but I can't just go to a company without a pile of cost and say, you owe me money for infringing on my patent. So you have to be able to protect your patent as well. So it's a whole pile of learning. And, I don't want to discourage people from going down the entrepreneurial route. You'll learn it. but the more you can access and leverage the supports around you, the community stuff, the better. And I'll let our university connected crew, who's probably far more familiar with this, Adrienne can jump in probably with a lot more.
Yeah, no, definitely happy to, because this is something that we encounter a lot. And my advice would be, when it comes to IP and regulatory strategy, if those are relevant to what you're building and the technologies you're building, consider these things at the earliest stage, because it'll save a lot of money, a lot of headaches, and it will fall flush with the development of your roadmap, right? Because building out an IP strategy and a regulatory strategy, then you can build out a budget, then you can build out milestones, then you also know that you're building your product in alignment with the regulatory requirements, and also you know that you're building a product that will be able to succeed because you've done your patentability assessments, you've done your due diligence in everything to do with IP. So there's also a different reality at every institution. So if you are academically born, every institution has a different reality. Sometimes it's inventor owned, sometimes it's institution owned, and getting the license into the company that you're creating, you need to figure out at what stage you want to do that, right? So if you are talking to potential VCs or investors, as Connie mentioned earlier, there's a whole set of considerations. But if you are having those discussions, then they're going to want to see the asset under the umbrella of the company. And if you start those discussions when that process hasn't already been done, and then they ask you, oh, okay, well, is the asset under your company? And you say no, but no worries, it'll happen quickly. It won't. It'll take a long time. Those conversations with certain tech transfer offices can take, a year and a half going back and forth. So I'd say if that's the reality, then be very close to your tech transfer office, have those discussions, be transparent, work with them, create a relationship of trust and confidence with them as well, because they'll likely expedite things for you if they have a long list of portfolio projects. So, that's just like relationship building outside and networking. Network internally with those that will influence your solution, your technology's reality, because those things will go a long way when it comes to mobilizing the scale up of the spinoff.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Adrienne and Connie. There is a question, Connie, I just saw that you were replied to it in terms of having IP for a process or service, or does it have to be a product? So answer is yes, but it's
harder. Same like IT stuff, so software and things like that, algorithms, stuff like that. It can be harder to protect. The one thing with the utility patent is it's a physical device. It's very obvious, relatively speaking, when the patent has been violated is in comparison to processes. So I wouldn't say don't go down that road, but don't book the success of the company on that. Sometimes a patent or a patent pending is as much a marketing tool as it is anything else, because it says you have something unique. So even if you don't get it and you aren't licensing a patent, it can still have great worth because it says you're doing something innovative. I think actually one of the things, and Adrienne mentioned this in her comments, regulatory. Do not forget to look at the regulatory components of what you do. So for us, that's a Canadian Electrical Code and CSA, Canadian Safety Association, things like that. And it can be big processes that have an enormous impact on your growth of your company. For us, like a battery in North America, it has to have UL 1973. And the requirements document is this thick. I'm not even kidding. And it's, we passed it, we're good, but it's a long process. So people always want to focus on the technology and then talk about the business and how you're going to generate sales. Don't forget about dotting I's and crossing T's, like IP and regulatory stuff, because you can go all that way and then find that you've got nothing because you haven't met the regulatory requirements, et cetera, for your industry.
Excellent call out. Thank you, Connie. Justine, you have your hand up.
Yes, hi. I've been told that I need to protect my intellectual property before moving forward, and I don't really know how to do that. Do you have any comments on that?
I would say that for us, we have both hardware and software. And I think that protecting your IP looks different depending on what your company does. And even if you do things in the same way as another company, you can approach it in a different way. So I think an IP strategy has been a really important thing for us to develop there. And then Connie did mention Accelerate IP. I actually always mix up Elevate IP and Accelerate IP, but there is two programs. There is and they both of them also have these three streams. So the first stream is essentially education. The second stream is the development of an IP strategy, and you do work with a lawyer to develop that IP strategy. And the third stream is to implement that strategy. So there is funding there to help companies develop their IP strategies. We have used that funding. We had a really great experience with that program, actually. And there are other resources out there too. So one of the ones that we used because our technology falls into the clean tech category, there is the Innovative Asset Collective, so IAC. And you should look into it more. I won't go into the details of it here, but it's essentially this collective of IP, but they do have grants that they offer the members every so often. And so we also were able to use those kinds of grants. But from the IP strategy perspective, you're protecting your IP might not look like writing patents. It might look like having trade secrets and just having that really well-defined, what are you keeping trade secret? How are you protecting that so that nobody else figures out what that is? Do you have something you actually can patent? If so, what is that? We actually went into the patent process thinking that it was just the hardware that we were going to patent. And when we got into these discussions with these IP lawyers in the strategy phase, when they learned more about what we were doing with the AI, they said, there's something patentable here. This is not what people would normally be doing. And so there was information there that we actually got from individuals within that space that we otherwise wouldn't have known. So I think and that was free. That was free to us as a company. So that was really helpful for us. And also just understanding like the different ways to actually protect your company, whether that's trademarks too, what falls under copyright, so all of those things I think are super important. But protecting your IP could mean so many different things. So what works or what is the best for you as a company, I think is that strategy. So understanding those things and then saying, this is how I'm going to do it. And this is how I implement that. I think that funders of all types like to see that moving forward. Thank you. Yeah.
And also just a thought, but if you have something that is patentable, or ideally you've already secured a patent, it can impact what partners you look at for potential investment, for example. So, instead of just straight up looking for, say, a venture capital firm of some kind, you might be looking for an industry partner who wants to license that technology. Like, for example, right now I mentioned we have a couple of infringers. Well, we could go to one infringer and say, we'll give you exclusive rights, and then you can block out your major competitor because we're nobody to you. So we'll keep doing what we do. We'll give you the exclusive right in North America, but now you're going to block out that other big guy. And that's a strategy as well. So sometimes that corporate partner can be a better fit because they might be very invested in protecting that IP so that they can use it. So that can be part of your IP strategy too. It's a little broader than just IP because it really comes into exit and raising and things like that, but something to consider.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And there is a question from Simrit and Connie. Maybe you'll be able to answer this in terms of Elevate IP. Do they also provide support for patenting?
I actually haven't used Elevate IP yet, but it sounds like Mallory has, so she might be better suited to answer that one.
Yeah, they do. So you can have your patent fees covered. This is all the stream 3. So What actually falls into stream 2, which is the strategy development, and stream 3, which is the implementation of that strategy. They have that all really well defined on sort of like their back end, but a lot of the law firms are already very familiar with what's covered under each of the different streams. I would say there's kind of like a strange opening and closing of the intakes for that program. So to check out their website and see actually when those fall. Last year, I think they were oversubscribed a lot sooner than what they thought they were going to be, and the funding ran out. So that's another thing to keep in mind with grants is like many of them they open on a certain date, and then when the money's gone, it's gone. And so you sort of have no warning of when you can no longer apply, and then you don't get to apply again until the next fiscal year, and it opens a second time. So yeah, so I would check those out, but yeah, like many things are covered, including patent fees.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, one more question from Lynn. What part of the product development will you register for the IP? Because you tend to optimize it constantly.
For us, I mean, we went with the initial, as soon as we had the concept and the initial drawings, the electrical drawings done, that's when we applied to our first patent. And then it became about looking at what additional patents can we apply for, because a patent, you know, we have a modular stackable battery system. There's a gazillion pieces in it, frankly. You know, like there's over 550 different components on our PCB boards. So there will be additional patents. So we went with the broad initial one, and then we will continue to add additional patents, or certainly apply for them as we continue to grow. So we're doing some work on predictive maintenance and extending lifespan right now, and hopefully that'll lead to some additional patents. But it's a constantly growing thing. We work on something new, we're going to apply for another patent if it seems appropriate. And like I said, sometimes the patent costs might not be worth it, because you have to pay yearly fees to maintain those patents, and depending on the number of countries you have that patent in, it can get pretty pricey. So, you know, be clear on what markets are most important. We couldn't patent it everywhere. We probably would have qualified, but we said, you know what, we can really only afford to do Canada and the US, so that's what we did. But that means that my patent that is quite useful in North America is not useful in Europe. So somebody can't patent it against me, but I can't license or protect that IP in other countries. So, I mean, it's a continue to build on it. I really wish I had known about Elevate IP when I first started out. I really stumbled through a lot of this stuff. So I emphasize again, get to know your community, because people will give you these tips. There will be people who've learned it the hard way who will say, definitely do this, try and avoid that. So definitely want to check that out.
Depending on which province you're in as well, for the getting to know your community, there might actually be people that can help you do this. I know in Quebec, we're very fortunate from one standpoint, from an innovation standpoint, and I'm unbiased, I'm from Toronto, but there is a lot of money being pumped into innovation and entrepreneurship in Quebec. And so what they actually did, and I took the course and I'm certified in this, is I've become a Quebec innovation consultant, which means that people can reach out to me and I have access to this portal, and I can find different resources that might align with the needs. And they now have a whole network of innovation consultants across the province that, depending on where you are geographically, you can reach out to your innovation consultant and get some recommendations and just have that point of contact, and that can maybe get the ball rolling. So I know that there's different programs and in different hubs. So make sure to check out your either municipal or provincial hubs and really see, is there maybe somebody that can just be my agent at the very beginning and just guide me towards certain resources, so I can just familiarize myself a little bit.
I think that's bang on advice. And actually, you know, one part of this we haven't really talked about, although it was kind of hinted at, was around the cash management. Services that people are offering for free are fantastic, but a lot of the grants, for example, have to have, whether it's for IP or other things, you have to have a certain amount of matching funds, and usually you have to have that money up front. So that creates a cash flow nightmare. So I'll give an example of a program we're in right now. We were approved for the Business Scale Up and Productivity program in Prairie's Can, and it's an interest-free loan, right? So the loan is up to $1.5 million. We have to be able to provide matching $1.5 million. Here's the challenge. I have to provide all the money up front. So I have to have $3 million to buy all of the equipment, and then however many months later, I'm going to get 50% of it back. Well, good luck. We really are having a hard time accessing that cash because realistically, we have big pieces of equipment that we have to buy. Like, a single load tester is $30,000, and I need racks of them. It's like owning a parking lot full of cars. And the program, the intent is great. I mean, an interest-free loan, wow, that's great. However, if you have to have all the cash up front and then I buy my $30,000 load tester and wait 9 months to get $15K back, that's a cash flow nightmare. So be very, very conscious of that. I actually was at a board meeting. I'm not on the board. I was asked to attend a board event for Alberta Innovates, and that was the big thing that I griped on is programs have to address the cash flow problem. Because if you expect entrepreneurs to be able to come up with all of this matching funds, and that really they need the full amount of funds in advance to access then a rebate later, that's a killer. That's an absolute killer. Most companies don't have credit to be able to go to banks to ask for lines of credit or things like that. So it's a challenge. That one is probably been the consistent hardest piece of managing the business.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you so much, Connie. So we are just at time for this portion of the session, but there's really great questions coming still. So I guess we're going to continue these conversations in our networking breakout rooms.